So now let's look at the individual curriculum. So we've discussed a national curriculum, a curriculum that is the same uniformly across all states. We've talked about a community-focused curriculum where a curriculum is focused and may be different across different communities, whether that's schools or districts or just within state across state. But now Noddings is arguing a very different approach, and that's an individualized curriculum. That is a curriculum that is unique to each student. So here we can see a strong connection to the ideas that Nell Noddings brings up in teaching into practice. Let's refresh. So Nell Noddings says that the goal of education is essentially to develop good people, and that in doing so we have to respect students as people, as their whole selves, and we have to make sure that learning happens by creating opportunities for students to use the knowledge in a meaningful way in their lives. So her philosophy of education greatly influences and aligns with her idea of an individualized curriculum. There are four main arguments she makes for why an individualized or personally crafted curriculum for each student is necessary and important. One, she says that students should only be required to know things, to learn things that will be practically useful in their lives. So she says, of course you need a basic understanding of the subjects, but we shouldn't expect students to be experts in all of the subjects because that's not going to be practically useful for them. How many students are going to be mathematicians, artists, and historians? Maybe the student just wants to be a historian, in which case the student should focus on the knowledge that will be useful for them and focus on their passions or interests. So this is point number 2. An individualized curriculum helps students develop the passions and interests that they have uniquely. And this in turn connects to point number 3, that if we allow students to decide what they're interested in and teach them by focusing on those passions, students will be more motivated to come to school and to meaningfully engage in the learning process. Also, if we only teach them knowledge that we can demonstrate as practically useful to them in their everyday lives, such as simple addition, this will be a stronger motivator to get them to learn this material. And all of this relates to this idea that a curriculum needs to be respectful to students and teachers. So if we don't try to force students to learn things that they're uninterested in or don't see the value in, then we are better respecting them. We're asking them, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you're interested in? And this respects them as whole people. Similarly, this respects teachers as well, as you're not forcing teachers to teach all students equally on all subjects. Instead, teachers are able to be respected for the expertise that they have and their ability to cultivate that expertise in the students that are interested in their subject area. Additionally, by allowing teachers to be responsive to students, it allows teachers to be more personable and caring, which can respect a teacher as a whole person, and not just as a person who retains knowledge, but also as a person who can relate and connect with students. Now, this might sound great, but many people think that this model is problematic. So some challenge is, which she brings up in her article on page 522, is that, well, if you let students decide what they want to learn, they're going to choose the easy way out. They're going to pick the subjects that are easier. They're going to say that they're not interested in math. Or they might say when they get to a math area that is hard and difficult that they are no longer interested, and maybe they change their passion or interest because they don't want to work through the challenging bits. Nell Noddings responds to this challenge and says, well, if students are really invested in learning something because they see it as practically useful or because it connects to their innate interests, they're never going to choose the easy way out because the process and the challenges are part of the fun when you're fully enjoying learning. Another concern is that if you have an individualized curriculum for each student, this places an unfair burden on teachers. How can you have teachers who know how to work with each individualized student? Do you have a teacher for each student? Is a teacher expected to be an expert in all fields? Many people worry that this type of focus on an individual student by student curriculum will pull teachers in too many directions and require too much of their time. A last concern is that if you say curriculum should be based on what the students are passionate and interested in, what happens when students' passions and interests change? So it might be the case that a student has been highly interested in history and the idea of being a historian or an archaeologist and has spent many years focusing and cultivating this passion through education and schooling. Well, what happens if one day the student wakes up and decides he's no longer interested in this and now wants to be an artist? How does an individual curriculum work in catching up with all the years lost where the student was not focused on that other interest? Or how does the curriculum keep up to the ever-changing interests and passions of students who may one day want to be a doctor and tomorrow want to be an artist? Here, Noddings would respond that it is important to think about an individualized curriculum as creating a foundation, a basic understanding of subjects. So even when a student's interests or passions change, they'll still have a foundation that they can rely on to build and pursue a future interest. What do you think about the idea of an individualized curriculum? If you were a teacher, would this be something that you would be interested in? If this had been your schooling experience in K-12 education, do you think you would have enjoyed it? Would it have been more beneficial? I'd like to end this lecture by thinking about several of the questions that come up as we discuss the idea of curriculum within the philosophy of education. One is, if we agree with Michael Apple that a curriculum can't be neutral, that the people in power always influence the content, then how can we make sure that the curriculums that we do develop, that we do use in our classroom, are as just or as fair as possible? How can we ensure that different perspectives and values are being recognized equally and treated equally if no curriculum can ever be perfect or fully neutral? 2, should we have a nationalized curriculum? Are the arguments made by the proponents of the Common Core stronger than the challenges raised by Michael Apple? 3, should we have an individualized curriculum? Is Nell Noddings' argument for the goals and purposes and approaches to education compelling? Or do they raise some serious implications, challenges of actually doing this in practice? And lastly, how do all of these ideas about the curriculum raised by Michael Apple and Nell Noddings connect to our course material that we've learned so far in this semester? How does it connect to Paulo Freire, Ivan Illich, John Dewey, etc.? If this is a topic that seems interesting to you, or you're interested in learning how the politics of official knowledge may have influenced or skewed your learning in the K-12 experience, consider reading or listening to the book by James and Lowen, The Lies My Teacher Told Me. This is a great explanation of the different things that we learn in school that are presented as truths that are not actually true.